Good evening, everybody. Thank you for being here. It's an honor and a pleasure to spend a night together learning and growing, and we so appreciate you choosing the Institute on this beautiful Tuesday day. So my name is Jenna Moe. I am the Senior Director of the Society of Fellows, and deep thank you to our members of the Society of Fellows who help support programs like this and also go deep with the work of the Aspen Institute to drive change through leadership and dialogue. Thank you for being here. And thank you to Crystal Logan, our Vice President of Aspen Community Programs, who we work with in partnership to present programs both for the public and for our members. So thank you everyone for being here tonight. And of course to Bonnie and Tom McCloskey for underwriting the McCloskey Speaker Series and presenting tonight's talk, From Sharecropper Daughter to Trailblazer. I am thrilled to introduce our moderator, Dr. Daniel Porterfield, who is previous president of Franklin and Marshall College and current president and CEO of the Aspen Institute. And our featured guest, Ruth Simmons, who we are so pleased is here with us tonight. It's a very special honor, and thank you, Ruth, for being here. She is former president of Smith College, Brown University, Prairie View A&M, and the author of Up Home, One Girl's Journey. And there is a book signing after the talk. Please join us in the lobby. Stage is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenna. Thank you to all of you who are here, to all of our staff in the room and outside the check-in desk, where we have an army of the best interns in the country, making sure that we can have this great program. And I feel a little bit like a good minor league baseball player that's getting the opportunity to interview Derek Jeter. This is amazing. This is amazing. We have Ruth Simmons here. It's just so awesome to be in your presence to talk about your book. And let me start with a little bit of just an audience gauge here. Does anybody here have anyone in your family or you yourself that went to Brown University? All right, there we go. There's part of the base. Anybody here that's got a connection to Smith College? Woo, there we go. All right, we're going to have a blast. Okay. We're going to get to questions fast. We have to. Anybody here connected to Princeton University? All right, I see another couple hands. We also, I can't help but ask this, are there any current or former college presidents here today? And don't put your hand down. This is Manya Whitaker, who is the president of Colorado College, just appointed. Thank you for being here, Manya. And I think we have here Betsy Fleming, and there she is. Yes, she's trying to be anonymous, but no. Betsy is a member of our board of trustees, the chair of the finance committee. Now, are there any other college presidents in this mix? Okay, good. So we got 4 of us that have done it, well, you're still doing it, and live to tell the tale. So I want to start, Ruth, with a question about American higher education. You have been also in major leadership roles in other institutions, in addition to the ones I named, and you have just completed your service at an incredibly important institution, Prairie View A&M. So you really have...
Thank you.
Oh, do we have any Texans in here? Raise your hand. Oh, look at this. Yes, there we go.
Okay.
So everybody in this room gets why success of our colleges and universities is so important to the democracy that we live in and the global economy that we're competing in and all the local economies that depend upon their institutions, including Colorado Mountain College here. So how do you think about this big, diverse sector of institutions that make up this thing we call higher education and college? What do you value in it, and what should we as a country be wanting from it?
Well, let me start by thanking you for having me today, and thank all of you for joining us for this conversation. I suppose what I would say to begin with is that I view nothing in our national life that is as important as the provision of education for every single person able to learn. And And so I like to remind people who are curious about my path from elite institutions to Prairie View and so forth, that I am not an elitist when it comes to education.
Yeah.
I believe there is value in learning. And I'm very interested in people being able to start wherever they can start and accumulate the experiences over time that can lead them to being very productive citizens and happy individuals. What could be more important than that? So I often say that education is the most important profession in the country.
Yeah.
Now, I know that what is so unique about higher education in this country is that it's so many different things. And that is a source of confusion to many people. So if you're in China or India or most nations around the world, there is a general mandate and a design for education, higher education. And you either comply with the qualifications to get in, or you miss out on higher education altogether. And the curricula are mandated. They are designed to be useful to the nation. And people choose not often what they want to study, but what they're able to study because the state will pay for them to study that. And here we are in a nation where you can study the most abstruse things, like French.
Yeah.
Okay? And so when I was a student, I fell in love with language, and I decided I wanted to study language, mostly because it put me in touch with many different people, because I needed to understand what was so different about our country. And so that was useful for me. But a lot of people thought it was extremely esoteric, and that I could never be very useful for anything.
Yeah.
And some people may still agree. But nonetheless, it fueled my desire to learn and do and get better and know the world. And so I appreciate greatly in our higher education that there are many different avenues to learning. It's not just one thing. And that we generally support the idea of general education as a foundation, with people specializing in things that they choose to specialize in. But we also say to them that although you may specialize, you can't be guaranteed that that's what you're going to be most successful in. Yeah. And so when I encounter people who, for example, have been English majors in college, who are now running Goldman Sachs. I love those stories because I think it ratifies, in a sense, my belief that what we're doing is preparing people to think. We're preparing them to explore, or discover, to use your word, to learn and to have a lifelong dedication to learning. Yeah. And if they have that, we assure them, they're always going to be fine, no matter what radical change occurs. They're going to be fine because they're going to be able to adapt to the changes that are going to come about. So I like the way that higher education is designed. Are there flaws? Yes, there are, I'm sure. We can talk about that later if you like, but so what? If you want me to, I can go through different countries, systems, and tell you what I think the flaws are there. Yeah. And so we may not have the perfect system for everybody, but we come pretty damn close to it. Yeah. Because every time I think about community college students who may come to this late, or who may come to it because that's what they can afford, and I think they can go from that all the way to the best institution in the country and become the most important person in the country. Absolutely. what about that? I mean, how can you not feel inspired by that? So I think we have I won't call it a system, but we have higher education that is there for anybody who has the will to learn.
So I want to ask 3 questions about 3 institutions: Smith, Brown, Prairie View A&M. And then I want to go into this extraordinary memoir. There's more we could say, of course, but first, women's colleges. You led Smith with distinction. Among other things, you brought the engineering program into Smith. How should we think about the role of women's colleges and education for women today? Big question, I know.
Well, I certainly believe that education should meet students where they are, where their needs are. So I worked at Spelman, and if you look at the success of that institution over a long period of time in preparing people for leadership, there's a reason, and that is that students who go to Spelman need that affirmation, need that environment. And if they were to describe it to you, they would say to be in an environment where you are absolutely free to learn without the impediment of people castigating you for particularities of who you are, let's say. That's a wonderful thing. So what's wrong with that? What's wrong with education that is for women? What's wrong with education that is for men?
Yep.
I'm on the board of a men's college.
Which school was that?
Morehouse.
I thought so, yeah.
And so, yes, there's a problem with the way that they prepare men, including my son who went there, and they say you can't tell a Morehouse man anything, and my son learned that there, and he's now trying to direct me into everything that I should be doing. But nonetheless, it helps to form individuals who have need of a particular environment to learn. And so there's nothing wrong with co-ed education. There's nothing wrong with religious-based education. So this is part of the wonder of higher education in this country, is it can be so many things. I recently gave a commencement speech at Brandeis, and I thought, oh my goodness. When I was preparing my speech for Brandeis, I had the opportunity to sort of go through and think about the things that institution has represented over such a long period of time. And my God, where would we be in this country without a Brandeis, or a Morehouse, or a Smith and Vassar and Wellesley? So I'm a big fan of creating opportunities for learning wherever the students need.
Yeah. One thing that's fun is we have Colorado College president here, and Colorado College offers this block program where you take one course at a time across your 4 years. It's just about the only one that does anything like that. And again, it's part of the diversity and richness of what we offer across the board.
Exactly.
Okay, Brown University. You are the first African American to lead an Ivy League institution, and you brought to Brown all sorts of other things besides that, but you were a trailblazer and will always be the first. And how would you describe for us your experience of leading Brown, and as you look at the Ivy League today, do you have any particular hopes for what it will evolve into in its journey?
I do, and I don't keep quiet about it either. So, as you may know, I'm advisor to the president of Harvard, and so they're used to my going on and on about what they should be doing. But the chasm that has emerged between so-called elite higher education and the rest of higher education is tragic and makes us more vulnerable as a group. Because it's easy to throw stones at these institutions because they are seen as the ratifiers of merit. Whereas we know that there is merit everywhere. And when they hold themselves up to be institutions where the best and the brightest attend, they do a disservice to all of those wonderful institutions that are doing an incredible job producing high achievers and learned people.
Yep.
And so when I was president, and you know the Ivy League is a league, and the presidents meet as a group, and we would meet and mostly talk about sports. What can I say? But occasionally we would talk about other things. And when I had the opportunity, I would go on my soapbox and say, it would be wonderful, and this was, 20-some years ago, it would be wonderful if we all agreed that we were going to open up admission to students from community colleges. Think of the impact that would have if we showed ourselves to be a part of higher education, right? That was soundly defeated, I would say, at the time, although, whereas during that period they accepted no transfers at all. Imagine, no transfers at all, no matter who you are, or what your need is, or what special field you could get at this institution, you may not enter, okay? But they've now all more or less begun to accept transfer students. And they have many, many more transfer students, and including from community colleges. So that's very good. I gave the commencement speech at Harvard a couple of years ago, and thought I would use it as an opportunity to say again what I thought Harvard should be doing.
Yep.
And so one of the things that I said is that wealthy institutions in the country have had the benefit of a massive growth in assets over a sustained period of time. Whereas many, like HBCUs, have been strangled over the same period of time. And that I thought the AAU and Harvard should see itself as having an obligation to help those institutions. So they got even with me and created a program for HBCUs that they asked me to help with. So I think there is more that the Ivy League should be doing, and not just preening, not just demonstrating how wonderful they are, not just criticizing everybody else. They should be embracing the task of representing higher education.
Beautiful. Thank you.
And why not do that instead?
So, when President Simmons was president of Brown, she was widely recognized as the most influential higher education leader in the country. In fact, Time Magazine, I think it was, said you were #1. I know you don't like that, I just told them that. But that's, and it was like a 1,000-person tie for number 999. You were one. And then when you retired from Brown, there were so many accomplishments, of course, in strengthening the institution. And not long after that, you were invited to become the president of Prairie View A&M University. And so I suspect you were the first person in higher education history to lead an Ivy League institution and then lead an HBCU. And of course, this opportunity came to you and sort of chose you. You could have said, no, I've got many other things to do, but you chose to go lead Prairie View A&M University. So tell us about that institution and its importance.
Well, the Prairie View was founded right after Reconstruction, at the same time that Texas A&M was founded. It was founded, like most HBCUs of that era, it was founded to be less than. Yeah. HBCUs were almost invariably founded to be very limited. to offer technical education, to be normal schools, and occasionally to be a seminary. And as time went on, they broadened their curricula, but still without the support needed to really do the array of curricular programs that they had. But many in that part of the world and really across the country are very drawn to these institutions because they believe that it is helpful for them. A lot of students today who go to integrated schools in high school want the experience of an HBCU, and so they may choose to go there. But here's what struck me. I was perfectly prepared to say no. After all, I thought I'd done enough. But after what had been done for me, in the end, I thought, what kind of person would I be if I said no? And could I live with that? Besides, my brother, who had gone to Prairie View, told me, as he is wont to do, well, you should do it because you've never done anything for black people before. Brothers are like that.
They are, yeah. My sister says that all the time.
Oh,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. That's my brother. But in any case, but it's worse than that, actually. So I said, what are you talking about? Don't you remember I was provost at Spelman? He said, that didn't count because that's a girls' school. That's, yeah. You get the picture.
Brother.
All right, yeah, you get the picture. So, when I visited the campus, I saw those young people walking across the campus, and my mind, of course, flashed to when I was their age. Yeah. And the fact that I was saved by a place like that from a life of who knows what. All of my brothers, I'm the youngest of 12. All of my brothers and sisters, most of my older brother and sister, they had no opportunity at all. They couldn't even finish high school. They worked as laborers and as maids and so forth. And yet I come along, the youngest, when civil rights is actively being pursued, and things open up a bit. And because of that, a place like that welcomed me and turned me into somebody who could do something other than just following the footsteps of my older siblings. So how could I ever stop helping, given what's been done for me? I just couldn't. Yeah.
So we could, if something happened, the power went out, we all had to leave. At this moment, you could go home and say, well, what did you do this evening? You say, well, I heard an interview with one of the giants of American higher education. That's what I did. I was in the presence of a giant. And that's actually objective. That's not a personal opinion. But now I want to give us another moment together, with your permission, which is since the lights aren't going to go off, people might be able to go home and say, I got to learn something about this giant's personal story and personal background, which is what you shared with the world with this remarkable memoir, Up Home. So the first thing I just would say is you mentioned you were the youngest of 12, and that you didn't say it, but your parents were sharecroppers, and you experienced East Texas poverty and all of the racism that enabled it. So you chose to write a book, which is about your childhood and your college years, where you laid out some of those experiences of your upbringing. And would you say a little bit about why you wanted to take the time and care to describe your upbringing? And then maybe I'll follow up with some of the meanings of that.
Well, first of all, I wrote the book for for my students. I didn't expect audiences like this to be talking about it. I wrote it for my students. I was very blessed as a president at Smith and Brown to have students who loved me and who supported me, and what an experience it was to be president of those institutions and to have them think so highly of me. And then to go to Prairie View and to experience the same thing, 3 separate instances. But there was one thing that really bothered me about it, and that is I thought that they had mythologized me, that they did not understand the person that I was and that I am, because they often would come to me and say, Ruth, I want to do what you've done, and so can you give me the step-by-step to, do that? Or they said ridiculous things, like a student at Wellesley who was, I noticed, was struggling up a hill on crutches. And I was coming from a meeting, and I stopped the car, and I said, "Get in, I'll take you wherever you want to go." And she said, to my horror, "Oh no, President Simmons, if you can do what you've done, I surely can get up this hill on crutches." Well, I thought that was ridiculous, right? So I didn't want them feeling that way, that I had done something so extraordinary, that I was so unusual. I wanted them to see my story as being very usual, something that anybody could have done if they had been in my circumstances. So I felt I needed to tell them a bit about my circumstances so they would understand that they could do whatever they sought to do if they worked at it, if they continued to learn, if they had some humility, if they cared about other people, if they, and so forth. So I just wanted to give them some insights into the person they thought they knew and that they admired. And so, I was trying to tone it down a little in terms of the accolades that I had gotten from my students. It didn't help very much to write the book, it turns out, but that was my aim, is for them to read about this and to understand that I know you think things are difficult today. I know you look around and you say, how can I possibly aspire to do anything? How can I believe in this country? How can I do this? I know you think that. But let me tell you about what life was like when I was a child. Let me show you the changes that came about because people cared, because people did something, because the country evolved, and so forth. I wanted to give them a sense of not being imprisoned in the moment and losing hope that they could ever attain the things they wanted to do.
So one of the things that you do is you show over dozens of pages your childhood experiences, which I won't try to summarize because you had to write a book to describe them. But we all contend with our past experiences. How were we raised? What was around us? What did we take for granted? What didn't we realize at the time was special? And one of the things, again and again in your book, is in the midst of course, tremendous racism structured to hold people back, and tremendous poverty, many people that you're very grateful for.
Yes.
And you call them out by name throughout.
Absolutely.
And this notion of gratitude in particular, I saw it again in relation to teachers. Yes. And will you say a word about that, about the importance of those everyday people that were your demigoddesses, if you will, that gave you access to what was inside of yourself?
When you think about the fact that so many children experience the most negative images of themselves at the hand of people who are, frankly, trying to make them feel really bad about themselves. And I think about people in desperate circumstances, incredibly poor. I don't think we understand poverty. And I used to say this to people who would mention that, well, gee, this person might not do well here because they are, they're desperately poor or something. Poverty is the condition of your pocketbook. That's what it is, okay? It doesn't say anything about who you are as a person. It doesn't say anything about what you can do as a human being or what you can be as a human being. And so I grew up in circumstances where, we'd walk down the street and people would yell out pejorative terms to us. And we couldn't go places, and we knew the reason we couldn't go places because we were black and we were thought to be dirty and different and inferior and dumb and so forth. So I was surrounded by that completely, except in my family and except in school. Yeah. So you've got this world of people telling you you're awful and you will never be anything. And then you have a group of people around you holding you up and saying, well, you might be able to do this, or you might be able to do that. And I always say, for my teachers especially, in those days, now remember now, in the 50s, the teachers in those days knew how bad things were for African Americans. And yet, they taught us to think about a different future. And I don't know, how do you do that? How do you imagine a different future when you're in the midst of something so awful? Well, that's what they did. They gave us a vision of something that could be, and that's what I lived on. I lived on the thought that my teachers saw something in the future that I couldn't see.
And these people, Ida Mae Henderson, you were very young when she was your teacher.
Yes.
Miss Caraway, you were young. And Miss Lilly, you were young.
Yes.
But yet they represented possibility, opportunity. They saw you.
And they did things. They acted on it. Now, Mrs. Caraway was my teacher in middle school, okay? And she gave me a job cleaning her house, and which was a ruse, of course. And I would go to her house, and I wasn't very good at cleaning. Let me just say, but I would do what I could. But then she would have fixed lunch for me, and I would be seated at a table in her fabulous house. And she would say, yes, you could do this and you could do that. And then she would take me shopping with her, which was an experience, unbelievable experience, because she had no children. And so she just spent her money on herself and her clothes. And so she would take me into stores where she was shopping and things of that nature. And then most of the time she was advising me constantly, talking to me constantly about what I could be in this world, right? And so, and then if you look at somebody like Mrs. Lilly, here's the thing. How many of us have the capacity to simply see someone with need and to act on it and not hold back because we think, well, how are they going to read that? And what does that mean? And, we intellectualize everything. Well, when I got in college, I didn't have any money to go to college. My teacher called me to her house, a different teacher, and asked me if I would do some cleaning. I don't know why they use that all the time, but I went to her house, but then she said, well, I want you to go in my closet, and I want you to pick some clothes for you to take to college. So everything I'm wearing in the yearbook of my freshman year of college is from my English teacher at Phyllis Wheatley High School. Her clothes from her closet, from her closet. I mean, how many of us do things like that? And yet my life was full of people, teachers in particular, who did things like that. How can you not believe if you have somebody doing that for you? Unbelievable.
Amazing. So one of the things that I discerned as I was reading your book is that the act of writing was giving you a chance to almost re-see and almost re-see yourself as you were at that moment, invited to another world, which also did mean eventually leaving the world you were in. It's so ambiguous for a feeling for so many of us. What is home? Your book is called Up Home.
Right.
Say, what does up home mean? And how did you later, in all the other things you did in your life, continue to draw upon home or reinterpret home or have home be a resource that you were still learning more about even as you were doing other things?
Well, it really in some ways represented the greatest struggle of my life. Imagine having parents and siblings without means and having the opportunity to do the things that I was doing. I remember when I was I went to France with the experiment in international living, and there I was in France living with a French family and going to southern France and bicycling through France, and these are all things that I could not tell my family about, right? And from there on, all the way up to I don't know when in my career, my family really never knew what I was doing. And that was my problem, probably more than it was theirs. But I did not want to alienate them. I didn't want them to feel less than me. And I certainly didn't want them to think that I thought I was better than they. And so this struggle that I had to try to deal with that for most of my professional life, frankly. It was not until I became president of Smith that my circumstances were disclosed. People didn't realize what my background was until the New York Times wrote it up when I was appointed president of Smith. And I never talked about it. I never emphasized it. I never wanted people to know necessarily. Because here's what I thought. I thought, well, why do you need to know that? Because I'm the same person, irrespective of all of that, right? And if you know that I grew up desperately poor, if you know that those circumstances, you may draw certain conclusions about what I was deserving of, right? And how dare you do that? I will not permit you to do that. So I was very conflicted about that whole story of what my true background was, but at the same time, utterly drawn to my background and proving that anyone with my experience and my background was as good as anybody else. So I was doing that internally. And again, the most important thing when I was writing this was to acknowledge, yes, but the story of my journey might not be Wellesley. It might not be the first black president of an Ivy League university. It might be this story about how people take care of each other and how you can thrive in any circumstance if people will only pay attention and care. And so the writing it helped me do that in certain respects.
Yeah.
But it's also a big surprise to people because most people still didn't know this story about me. And I should say my relatives found out for the first time the things that I had done, right? Because they didn't know all of it.
What a journey. I have had the privilege of mentoring many students from comparable walks of life. And recently I wrote a book where I was interviewing students about their experiences, and there are 4 black women that I separately tell stories about that I just have to send them your book, because your book expresses a version of what they live today, the exact journey for opportunity, for developing their greatness, for being seen as themselves, but also learning to appreciate even better where they're from.
There's something I should have pointed out that's very important to me, and that is when people ask me today how I served in those roles without coming apart.
Yeah.
You know, how could I do that and being able to? How was I able to survive it and be successful at it? Well, the story is I was able to do that because of this home. Because of how much it grounded me, how much it taught me the value of being who I was, and nothing, when I was president of Smith, when I was president of Brown, nothing could touch me. Yeah. And this is a question that people ask about Brown, especially because I took on the slavery issue at Brown, and people thought that I would be destroyed by that. And it turns out to be the thing everybody cites as being the most successful thing I've done. But they said, well, how did you survive that? Well, I survived it because I didn't care that people were criticizing me about it. I believed in the project. I believed that telling the truth was one of the things the universities had to do in order to be respected for the institutions they are. And so it wouldn't have mattered to me what people said. I would have done it anyway. And I think that's the thing that helped me navigate all of those different experiences, is because of what I grew up with.
And I almost want to surmise that in one sense, the journey from high school to college was as big a journey as later being president of Brown or something, because you were that kid leaving home, going to Dillard to create your education.
Right.
And that might be the story too, just what you did, how you were able to create an education that was freeing for you. Maybe I'll ask one question and we'll open it up, but particularly about college, since we started talking about all the pressures and complaints about college. For you, that 4-year experience was indeed transformational, like a butterfly coming out of a cocoon or something. And as you look back at that, what was it about college that's so important to the meaning you found in your work since then?
Well, first of all, it exposed me to things that I never would otherwise have been exposed to. And hopefully everybody's college experience does the same. So imagine now, I'm deep in segregation. I don't know any white people. I can only imagine what they must be like and how they would receive me. And then I end up going to Wellesley College.
Yeah.
Imagine that, okay? And imagine getting on a Greyhound bus when I was 17, going home for the summer and not telling my family what I was doing, and getting on a Greyhound bus and going to Mexico to live with a Mexican family to learn Spanish. And just the experiences that I was able to have with different people. People often ask me why I'm not angry and why I don't hate people. And I guess the reason for that is because I was I was blessed to have experiences with people where I could understand. I could avoid making sweeping generalizations about an entire race or an entire segment of society. And I got that from college, right? from studying, from meeting different people, from looking back on my own life and my own country and thinking about what all of that meant. I got that from my undergraduate years in college. And I also got, from my undergraduate years in college, the passion that I have about education. I tell this story of something that happened to me at Wellesley, which was that we were in a class one day, and it was a classical philosophy class. And for some reason, the question of apartheid in South Africa came up. And everybody was talking about this, in a very animated way and saying how horrible it was and so on. And then this girl raised her hand and started to talk. And she said, she started to defend apartheid. And it turned out she was a white South African studying at Wellesley. And I often say, that was, I don't know if you know the French word bouleversant, but I was completely thrown by the fact that one person with a different perspective in the classroom made all the difference in the world in terms of the way that we looked at apartheid. Yeah. Didn't change my mind about the value of it, but just the notion that you can have so many different perspectives, so many different backgrounds together meant that, and so it shaped greatly how I looked upon my leadership in higher education. And for those people who, who want, students used to come to me and say, Ruth, I'm really not happy because people are criticizing me and they're asking me about my hair, and I really don't want to be bothered with that. I said, well, then go home if you don't want to, because you are here to teach people about who you are. And if you don't want to be here, go to Harvard or someplace. But your job number one is to show who you are, to help people understand who you are and why you are who you are. And that has been so important to me in the way that I think about my job. So I know there are people who disagree with me. So what? Yeah. My first experience as president of Brown was a very famous alum of Brown, who was a CEO of a corporation, major international corporation, came to see me and said, I want to give you some advice about being president of Brown. I said, oh, that's fine. So he said, first of all, there are too many women in leadership roles here. And there are too many minorities. I don't want my university that I love to be known of as Diversity University. Well, he's looking at me and saying this, and so I'm thinking, well, what can I say that's positive? But it occurred to me how brave he was to come to tell me his thoughts about that, knowing who I was. Yeah. And so that's what I said to him. I said, I really want to thank you, first of all, for being honest with me. Yeah. I don't agree with you, but I certainly am grateful that you feel comfortable talking to me. We became good friends. I did the eulogy at his funeral when he died. And so we are filled with so much disagreement in this country, and lose the ability to talk across difference. And I'm very concerned about that and want our colleges to pay attention and to help people remedy that. Sorry, I went on about that.
Well, let me open it up. So I'll start here on the right, where this is being webcast, and so it's good if you use the mic so that web audience can hear.
So this gets a little bit into your last answer to your question about how learning in college and being yourself and learning all the different backgrounds. Are you concerned, like I am, about what's happening in our public schools, at least in our public schools, with book bannings and restricted curriculum and selective history? And how is that going to bode for raising our students and our children the way that we should?
First of all, it will not stand. These efforts, we should expect to see things like this occur, okay? They are misguided, to be sure, because you cannot be interested in learning, qua learning, if you're trying to shape how people get information and whether or not it's the information that pleases you. And so it's very misguided, but I don't worry about it so much because I don't believe that it's going to be able to survive, okay? And the message I have for people generally is we're going through these kinds of times right now, but remember, we've been there before, and we overcame them, and we have to do it again. Our work is never done, you know. We have to keep at it, and if we believe in this project that we have, which is a common project, we have to believe in the effort to make sure that everybody can be well educated. Because if you're not well educated, how in the world are you going to be part of a common project? You can't be. You can't be. And so, you know, it reminds me that there's so many different perspectives. I was looking at the opening ceremony for the Olympics and the uproar over what the French were doing in that opening ceremony, and how angry some Christians were about some of the expressions there. You know, there has not been a time in our history when people have not been angry about the representation of our life and of different people. That's been part of every period. And yet, well-meaning people inevitably take up the cause and they overturn it. And that's what we have to remember we're here to do. We're here to pay attention and to care about what happens and not be silent when stupid things happen.
So I'm going to call on this person next, but I would like the next question to come from somebody in college or younger. And if nobody asks that question, Boris is working in the crowd. I'm going to make him ask the question. So you can put Boris on the spot if you want. But let's go to this questioner now.
Okay, you don't think I look young enough to be in college? I could fool you with that.
Touche.
Ruth, it seems like in many ways higher education has taken major steps backwards in the things that exactly you said, which was to experience different points of view and be tolerant of different perspectives, with trigger warnings in classes and canceling speakers and all of the things that have gone on, not to mention the latest demonstrations at Columbia and Harvard and other places. It seems like we're losing ground on that, not gaining ground. What's your view?
Well, you know, my view is that people in college can be just as silly as any other group, and we have, without question, over the past few decades, gone into a mode that has led to a cul-de-sac from which we will find some difficulty extracting ourselves from. So let me give you some examples, and forgive me if this is too controversial for you, but I don't hold back in terms of what I believe. First of all, so much of what we do is well-meaning, and you can hold on to that. Okay, so people in college want students to feel comfortable. They want them to feel a sense of belonging because they know that's very healthy. And so it's probably no surprise that some have gone too far in that direction, wanting people to feel comfortable at the expense of learning. So when my first year, just as I arrived at Brown, it was a huge controversy. A man had put an ad in the Brown newspaper saying that African Americans were very fortunate to have been enslaved because they were rescued from a horrible situation in Africa. And he put an ad in the newspaper, and the newspaper published this, and the students, there was a big uproar about it, and the students removed the newspapers, and there was a great debate about whether or not he was entitled to express his views. So a club on campus, I had just arrived as president, a club on campus invited him to speak. And the students came to me and said, Ruth, you have got to stop it. You can't have him come to campus because there will be a total uproar about it. And I said, well, no, I won't do that. They said, but you're black, you should understand how heinous this is. I said, well, yes, I do, but I'm going to go to his lecture, and if I can sit there and listen to him, you can very well do that too. And so sometimes it takes the mettle of leadership to insist that we can hear difficult things, we can hear vile things, because this is the important thing, because we have the right to respond. And that's what I said to students, because you can come to the lecture, and when appropriate, you can challenge him on all of these things that he's saying. I think we are so afraid in this country today to hear things that we don't like to hear, to be challenged in our thinking. And that leads to very bad results. It leads to people not feeling silenced, not wanting to be a part of a process, hiding what their thoughts are. And so you got all these groups growing up with extraordinary thinking that is hidden from everybody because they don't think that the uproar is going to be worth it. What are we afraid of? We should fear violence, that's for sure. But just because somebody says that they don't like me, what difference should that make to me, really? What difference? It shouldn't make much difference to me. And if we don't teach people how to react in those kinds of circumstances, we're going to be really in bad shape in this country. And we're headed there now, for sure. Because if you ask people what do they think is the future of the country, you'll get a lot of responses that suggest that people are not sure at all that this country can hold together. Well, we better start rethinking the way we are reacting and validate the things that really are at heart what holds the country up as a democracy. And that means that we ought to be getting students together to encourage them to debate issues, to encourage them to get to know people who are very different from them, and we ought to insist that we not make it overly comfortable for them, because that's not always the right answer, making it comfortable for them. I certainly didn't feel comfortable as a student And I think the reason that I ended up being able to be a president for all kinds of different people is that I never fell into that trap of thinking that I needed to be, somehow my existence needed to be ratified. I was being educated. And what I wanted to do is to understand and then to have a chance to have people understand what I have to say. So I think there's a lot of work to do in universities. Some universities are frightened by what's going on because they don't know which way to turn. But let me tell you what I think. I never felt as university president at Smith, at Brown, at Prairie View. I never felt as university president under threat for doing what I thought was the right thing and for speaking out in the right way. Never, not once. I think what university leadership needs to understand is that you're expected to lead, and you are expected to have opinions, and you're expected to say things to students about what you think they need. And I did that constantly, and I was never punished for it. So I think people are afraid in some ways that being too assertive in these matters will lead to their not being able to continue in their role as leaders. I don't think that's true.
I think we can bottle that answer and make a master class for presidents everywhere. Thank you for the question and for the answer. I'm looking for a younger person here. I would like to hear, okay, here we go.
How would you go about inspiring and encouraging those who are reluctant to learn and really trying them to learn as much knowledge, and gain as much knowledge, and really better themselves through education and such?
How would I go about encouraging them? Learning is a thing that is so omnipresent in our lives. Every day you get up, there are opportunities to learn. Sometimes we don't recognize that. Sometimes it's useful to point out to young people that that's what's going on because they don't actually realize that it's not legitimized for them in a way, right? I have a nephew who is very precocious, and he does all kinds of different things. And what I try to point out to him when he is doing something that is expanding his mind, teaching him to do something different, I try to point that out to him so he becomes conscious of it. The most important thing is the people around them. Here's the thing I say to educators. You cannot educate well if you're a downer. Well, you just can't. So you want to get them around someone who is enthusiastic about learning, someone who is caring. I tell the story of walking into my first classroom. I'm coming from a farm, right? I have I'm wearing rags. My hair is a mess. I go into this classroom, and this teacher in the classroom, Miss Ida Mae Henderson, greets me as if I'm royalty. And the very idea that this educated woman, seeing how I'm dressed, seeing how lowly I am, greets me in that way and encourages me to learn, just lit a fire under me because I thought she must see something and I wanted to be what she saw. So you need to have people around that person who can say things that will encourage them. And so, a lot of people think being critical is helpful to learners? Well, if it's done in the right way, yes. But if it's to discourage a young person from doing something that is important to them to do, it's probably not a good strategy for encouraging them to learn. So what we all must remember is everybody in this audience interacts with somebody who is looking to you to represent something in their lives. It happens to us countless times in a day. Often we're unaware of it, right? And so forth. So I was in the airport yesterday, and this woman came up to me and didn't know her. And she started talking about what she was doing. And I tried to remember to be enthusiastic about what she was doing. I didn't think I'd ever see her again. It didn't matter, really, because we all have the opportunity at every turn to do something that is so profoundly impactful on others that we miss those opportunities. And yet, if you can usually find people who will say, one day I ran into this person, and he said this, and I've never forgotten it, ever, right? We know we have encounters like that. And so let us be that encounter for other people as much as we can.
So I asked President Simmons if she would mind if I picked out one short passage to read to conclude the evening, and she will be in the back to sign books if anyone would like. So with your indulgence, I'd like to read a section at the end of the book, which only gets us through college. There's at least 2 more memoirs out there, I bet. It goes as follows at graduation day. As I reflected on the previous 4 years, I marveled at the transformation I had undergone. The pain of my mother's death had not disappeared, but it had receded enough for me to move on with my life. The Worthing and Danforth scholarships had opened a series of doors for me. In the courses and struggles on the campus, I found myself not the person I had created in high school, who was full of affectation and pretension, but the one who grew up and accepted the responsibility to be independent and constructive. In the 4 years of liberal arts courses, I found a reservoir of information and insight into the question of what my life could be. It could be an ongoing quest for deep understanding of who I am. It could be a role in a historic moment of societal transformation. Although I did not have the exact formula for the self-improvement I sought, I recognized I was now better equipped to face the process. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you.
Okay.
And President Simmons will be in the back to sign some books.
I will.
Oh, yeah.
But the